Marty Howden over here at the CCC POW camp. And this is the meeting that I have been waiting for 15 years, a little almost 15 years. A relative of one of the POWs who gave us the most information that we could get anywhere is here today from Germany with a traveling buddy of his, so he didn't have to travel alone. This is Matthias is the correct pronunciation. I've used the wrong pronunciation for a few years here now, and I just recently learned the right one, and I'm having a little trouble with making it work. Matthias is the name. And you see if you can get that out of M-A-T-T-H-I-A-S. M-A-T-T-H-I-A-S is Matthias, okay? All right. The short. Robert is easy, all right. And he got here last night from Toronto and Niagara Falls. He's staying at my son's house, and we're taking him to the Tavern 19 for supper tonight. He had supper in our kitchen last night. And we didn't get any pictures, but hopefully we're going to get some pictures here today. My wife takes pictures of squirrels and woodchucks and cats in the neighborhood, but we didn't get a single picture of Matthias and Robert last night. But introducing a few people here. The guy with the camera over there, that's Mark. He has jumped in here. He's the closest thing I have to an apprentice for what I've been doing here in the last few years. We keep using, well, that's the first time I've used the word apprentice, but I keep throwing these hints at him. Somebody has got to take this over for me someday soon. My brother Tom, who just moved across the street from Connecticut on Hamlin Road, that's Tom. And my brother-in-law, Ray, they are part of the team that, well, you'll see them scurrying around when I get done loading stuff up in the back of my truck. The new park manager, the guy with the glasses on his hat, reminds me, no, fine, no, you remind me of Marty Howden. Boy,
I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing.
Marty Howden.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Good thing.
Very good.
Very good.
That's a good thing, by the way.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
And that's Ross Lovell. Lavelle.
Yep.
Ross Lavelle. And let's see, we have a gentleman from Letchworth, John
Snyder.
Snyder. Nick just reminded me, you know, getting a little senior moments, taken over here frequently. Let's see, Nick Kramer, he's the groundskeeper for the CCC POW camp. He and his grandson keep the sticks picked up and the leaves raked and so on and so forth. And Mark has joined in on that. And we have a reporter from what newspaper?
Genesee Valley Penny Saver.
The Penny Saver, all right? That's some of this is going to end up in print somewhere. We have Patty Sullivan here. She is the president, present president, and she's just newly made president of the Friends of Hamlin Beach State Park. And that's the end of my guest list. And I want to get right into my program here. This is why we're here. I think you can eat donuts in the dark.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
There we go. And this is to show it a little bit better.
Okay.
And the way this is going to work, whatever you see up here will appear in front of you before too awfully long. We have hard copies of everything, almost everything that appears up here on the screen, and we have a few extras thrown in besides, and they'll be moving down the table as the program proceeds. This is Matthias. I have a laser here I can use so I don't have to stick my arm out. Boy, that shows up, doesn't it? Boy, did that hurt, Matthias? Boy, that's Matthias, and that's his grandfather, Heinrich. Heinrich, we would say Willert, and I think in German they say Willert. They pronounce the W's as V, and you probably hear me calling him Heinrich Willert. But this is 2008. They are in what's left of the Niagara Falls prisoner of war camp. They had a prisoner of war camp there capable of holding over 4,000 German prisoners of war, and that's all they have left of it. That's it. Nothing. Boy, can we put them to shame with what we have over here. He was here, Matthias was here with his grandfather in 2008. He was trying to get his grandfather to relive some of the pleasant experiences he had as a prisoner of war here during World War II. He went back to Germany, and that's the last time, as far as I know, that he set foot on American soil here. And he had hopes of getting here to see the camp that we have. Matthias is going to do that in absentia a little bit, well, after this program here is over. The conditions are going to be a little bit rough, but they brought the right footwear, and we're going to make it happen. Today, I also want to remember this young lady here. This is Mary Smith. This was a Hamlin historian. At the time we started work clearing the site, she passed away about a year ago. And this was the only trip she ever made to our CCC site, POW site. You can see it's in a pretty rough condition. She was, oh, by the way, you can follow along on that little handout that you got. On page 2, you have a picture that looks like this one right here. And that is our prisoner of war camp with the fence drawn in. This picture here was taken before we found out where the prisoner of war fence was. We had just begun work, and for Mary's concern, it was just a CCC camp that we were clearing at the time. But I dedicated my last show, which was December 12th, to her, thinking it was indeed my last show. And then I got an email from Matthias, and so this is going to be my last show. And so I'm going to honor Mary Smith again and dedicate this to both Matthias, Heinrich, and Mary. This is pretty much to orient Matthias and Robert with where they happen to be sitting right now. We are in this building right here. Now you also have this in your little handout. Those of you who need to place yourself in today, you can just turn to the appropriate page. This is where we happen to be sitting right now in this building, and this is the CCC POW campsite. Now I'm not going to say hardly anything at all about the CCC. Today is going to be the first time I've been allowed to do the entire program, prisoner of war camp. Never been done before. I've been looking forward to this. So there is the CCC POW camp. I'm just going to call it the POW camp now. There's that old house, the old farmhouse. The locals call it the haunted house when they're trying to describe how to get to the site. There is the pond. That's kind of a landmark too. Before we started work, before that picture you saw of Mary, there were 5 or 6 fishermen in this area found a way to get to this pond. They would come in behind the farmhouse and drive around, and found a way to hide their car here so the park police wouldn't see it. And then they had a little trail that they worked to get back to this pond. Now the fishermen, they are back there in droves. I mean, they walk through the camp, the POW camp, to the fishing site all the time. So all the cars you see down there occasionally aren't just to look at the POW campsite. A lot of them are out there to go fishing. I don't have a script. I go by what shows up here on the screen here. I don't have a program written up there. There's the house. There's how you know you are close to the POW camp. The POW campsite is over here and back into the woods. Now that house, I have another picture of that house. Here's where I put it. Some of you might have seen it out in the lobby here. As far as I'm concerned, this house was part of the POW camp. We know it was part of the CCC camp because the CCC boys played basketball in the barn. It used to be there, it isn't there anymore. But they also were very friendly with the people who lived in the house. And when this was a prisoner of war camp, the people who lived in the house were Leverances. I think the father's name was Luther Leverance. The 9-year-old boy was Gary Leverance. He ended up being my neighbor on Hamlin Center Road. So I've got quite a few stories directly from him when they lived in here. The German prisoner of war that painted this picture, his signature out in the hall is down in the corner here. The framing kind of covers it up. One of our POWs, I think it might have been Gottfried, not Heinrich, actually researched to find where in Germany this painter lived and so on, and was semi-successful in the whole thing. But I won't try to pass this one, that's a little bit heavy, but make sure you take a close-up look at that house, because it looked a little bit different back then, and was indeed a part of the POW camp. This is what the site looked like when we started work. When Marty Howden called me into his office, he had been told to watch out for this little short blonde-haired guy. He kept sticking his nose in park business, and he took the warnings to heart. He invited me in, and we had a little heart-to-heart, and partway through it he says, do you happen to know anything about a prisoner of war camp we had on our site here? And I thought he was setting me up, but then the next question was, do you think we could turn it into a history trail? And then he gave me the real clincher. He said, would you be willing to help? That was June 7th, 2008. June 8th, 2008, my wife and son and I, we raced out there and we started work. And what you see, what we ended up with, you see. This picture was taken by me. A former student of mine took me up on a plane. I think his name was Brian Spear. And I took a picture of it. This is the perimeter of the 10 acres that comprise the prisoner of war camp. This is the pond that the fishermen parked their cars, hid them over here, and snuck through here to go fishing. This is the Lake Ontario State Parkway, and you are sitting up somewhere up in here. Now, that looks like a pretty calm picture, but down on the ground, it's a heck of a lot different than you see in this picture. We had to wade through this stuff. We call it shark's teeth on a stick. And this is the small piece. The real pieces I couldn't fit in a tube. The shark's teeth, some of them were an inch tall. They would rip leather. I have a jacket to prove it, trying to walk through there. There were vines that Tarzan swung from in the movies, about big around as your wrist. And these vines were killing all of the tall trees. So it was a heck of a struggle to get through there. But we persisted and we made it. Of course, we had some other things to contend with once we started clearing the brush. The Department of Transportation liked to use it. This, well, it was a convenient place to get rid of all the picnic tables that were no longer of use in the state park. This is the day that Dan Wilson, boy, he's since passed away, but boy, that guy at 79, 80 years old, he could outwork any teenager, for crying out loud. This is the day he busted through this pile. This pile went all the way from here, all the way over to here, and he would take these tables apart, and he put the hardware in garbage buckets, and he would sort the lumber, and the good tabletops he would make bridges out of, and so on and so forth. But he did that by himself, single-handedly, that fall and that winter. This is what it looked like this is what it looks like now. The picnic tables are all missing. Here's some of the tops we used to make a bridge. The area is no longer wet, so we don't worry about it. What do I say next? Oh, okay, let's see. This is the day that, when we first started this, clearing this prisoner of war camp site, it was pretty jungly, and you can see it's still pretty jungly here. This is about 8 months into the project. This is about 8 months after Marty said, go at it. And this is the day I discovered the original flagpole foundation that you see in your picture. On page 2 in your picture, or it's on page 1 too, but on page 2 is where the prisoner of war camp is, and the flagpole is still in that picture. But from that day on, I was able to pretty much locate where the rest of the park, the rest of the camp was. All I had to go by at that particular time was this. This is Mary Smith's 50-page booklet that she put together in 1985 because she found 40 CCC guys that were still on this side of the grass that decided they wanted a little reunion. And she organized a reunion and prepared this book for it, and she put a picture of the CCC camp which became the POW camp on the cover. This is all I had to go by. I would lay my ruler down, put on my magnifying glasses, and measure in millimeters and translate it to feet, and well, several copies of this thing, all cluttered with numbers and facts and figures to find out where I was at. But boy, the day I found this thing here, whew, the sky opened up for me. I'll let you get a closer look at that. This is what it looked like. That previous picture, all of the garbage and the junk has been removed. It looks pretty much like that now, except the flagpole has been improved by an Eagle Scout. And we have a bench over here now, a much better flagpole. That table is gone. We have grass that gets mowed now. It's pretty doggone nice. This is what that previous picture looked like coming back from the other side. Coming towards the camera and the other side, this is what it looked like. And these are school kids from Spencerport that came here. Boy, they loved it here. Boy, it was hard getting them on the bus after they were here for a while. They just tore into that brush like they knew where they were going. A lot of it was just plain manual labor and female labor. That's my wife. This is a little brush buggy, we call the thing. Dan, the guy who has since passed away, did the picnic tables. He invented this thing and built it so that it would go over tree stumps and rocks and so on. It pulled real easy, but he had a rule: if you filled it, you emptied it. Well, my wife filled it, and she's on her way to emptying the thing in that picture. Then we got a real bonus. This lady contacted Marty by telephone. She had heard about our project. Her name is Margie Boyer. She was 22. The summer she worked for the POW camp. She drove the guard car that followed the buses and the trucks to the canning factories. This lady said, hey, I can show you where the main gate was and stuff like that. So Marty invited her, and we put her in this little vehicle. She didn't walk so pretty good, but boy, she drove a car pretty good. And I have, this is for her too. What happened was, her father knew somebody who knew somebody, so he got her a job to drive the guard car. Well, when a commandant of the POW camp found out he had just hired a female in one of these, to boot, a real good-looking 22-year-old lady. She worked at the USO shows on weekends and stuff. They said, oh no, we can't have her driving a guard car. We can't have a woman like that in with guards in a closed vehicle. Oh no. So her father went and bought her one of these. This is a 1947 Chevy convertible, the same color as Margie's, the same model and everything. I found it in a garage sale shortly after I heard the story here. But anyway, her father went and bought her this, drove her up to the commandant's building at the state park, or at the POW camp, and he says, now can she drive the guard car? And he sprung the answer so quickly on the commandant, he didn't have time to come up with an excuse, and she ended up driving the guard car that entire summer at the POW camp. So there's Margie's car. She was very, very useful, very, very handy. There she is with me. I've got one of these pictures, got one of these, not that one, but that one there. I got that, and I'm showing it to her and asking her where the guard towers were, where the main gate was, and so on and so forth. We had to drive her up and down Moscow Road before she was able to tell which entrance was she came in. But once she got herself acclimated to the area, she got pretty sharp. And right after she's looking here, I quickly said to her, I found out, I know for firsthand now because of my present age, you get some senior citizen, if you ask them a question and give them time to think about it, I don't know. But if you spring the question on her, boy, the answer usually comes right out. And while she's looking up there, I say, Margie, where was the main gate? Oh, right over there. She said, oh, she surprised herself. And from there on in, her mind had opened up, and she started pointing out all kinds of neat things. to us. And then we got real lucky. This piece of wood was, as it turns out, it was kind of a nightmare for a while. While we're clearing it, here's this piece of wood, it's still about this high. And people will, they kick it and sort of, don't kick, that might be important, that might be an artifact. As it turned out, I had a little revelation one day. I said, hey, I wonder if maybe that was an upright for the prisoner of war fence, the barbed wire fence that went around. And it wasn't typical. I know that the paperwork says it was supposed to be a 2x6, but when they were putting up this POW camp, they had to follow all the rules that the Army Corps of Engineers laid down for them. But because the farmers and the canning factories had to pay the price to convert whatever it was they were turning into a prisoner of war camp, the farmers and the canning factory had to pay for it. And whenever it was possible, they substituted some of the stuff in the mandated list here with stuff that was locally available. Well, Duffy Mott's had a whole bunch of tongue-and-groove, 3x5 tongue-and-groove boards in the roofs of their warehouses. And so they supplied, instead of the 2x6s, these roof boards, and they constituted the uprights in the fence. And that was, so my guess was, hey, this thing here might be one of the last remaining, the only last remaining uprights of the fence. And with that theory in mind, I showed up one morning all by myself, and I had a tablespoon. And I started digging across here. I said, if this is a fence post, if I start digging across here, I gotta come to a barbed wire. And I kept digging and digging and digging and throwing stuff over my shoulder. And pretty soon I found myself throwing over my shoulder pieces of this corroded wire. And when I realized what I had been throwing over my shoulder, I then started to uncover a little bit more and said, holy smokes, this is indeed a barbed wire. I'll be darned. So I went home and got my wife. She has neat genes. I don't have any neat genes at all. She is meticulous. So she, with a garden spade, she dug this trench right here, and there was a staple right inside here, stapling this wire to the post. It fit the book of regulations perfectly. The book says the very first 2 strands of barbed wire for this fence had to be buried in the ground so that you couldn't dig under the fence. Well, they did cheat. They only put in 1 wire, but at least they had the 1 wire, and there it was. Well, once we had that, we went nuts. When we got to corners, when we get to where a corner, it was all a rectangular shape. When you get to a corner, this is what we find. The wire wrapped around a 4x4. They were supposed to be 2x6s, they cheated again, they used 4x4s. And here's the wire wrapping around a 4x4 at a corner. And this is the guy, I give him a whole lot of credit. This is Sean Lassord. He's from Clarkson, and he had an expensive metal detector, and he and I, on our hands and knees, from where we dug this first little piece of wire, went around on our hands and knees every 20 feet, digging down to see if we could come by the wire, so that we were able to come up with this picture right here. That is the diagram that we came up with using his metal detector. We also found a whole bunch of artifacts during the digging, and some of these artifacts, I'd like to show you some of them here. This one here, I usually do show it last, I'm going to show it first. The ground at this site, this is the way it looks pretty much, this is the south end right now. It's got some snow over it, and I'm going to take Matthias there and Robert after this program is over with here. And, but anyway, this area, it's just loaded. The ground is just full of artifacts. You can't dig hardly any place there without coming up with something that was there during the CCC and the POW. And to show you just an extreme example of this, one of those 5 or 6 fishermen that snuck across the back there to go fishing stopped at a groundhog hole of one day, and on the top of the groundhog hole, he found this. This is a CCC pin, the official government issue CCC pin. The clasp is still usable on the back. And a woodchuck found this. Well, if a woodchuck can find something like that, can you imagine what somebody with a shovel can find? We're not allowed to dig with a shovel. We told the lady from Albany, the lady in the Office of New York State Historic Preservation, that we would not do any digging. But she did tell us, if you see something sticking up out of the ground, retrieve it so that it doesn't end up on eBay. Well, one of the very first we found was this. This has not been shown very much. The lady in Albany allows me to have a few of these artifacts to take around to use at shows like this, and this is one of them she has allowed me to take and preserve. The date on the bottom shows it was fired during the beginnings of World War II, and it was in the mess hall cupboards in the back. The mess hall was designed to hold silverware and dishes for 250 people. So what that means is, since this was found after the POW camp closed, your grandfather and Gottfried had to have eaten out of this thing at least once. I mean, they 6 months, 2 meals a day, and there's only 250 of these. They've got to have eaten out of this thing at least once. So, not yet. Well, what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to put some pieces of candy in here. There's some zero sugar chocolate in here too. And if you would like, as the bowl comes down there, if you would like to be able to say that you ate out of the same bowl that Heinrich Willard and Gottfried Schulze ate out of, take a piece of candy, and the claim is good. So pass it down so everybody can see it. That bowl.
Grandfather ate out of that.
That bowl appeared when a cherry tree, about a 70-year-old cherry tree, blew over, and there was a root ball on it about this high, and the town supervisor's wife was crawling around underneath it, and she came out with that bowl. We have a picture of her coming out with that particular bowl. We also found this. I won't pass this one around, there's a crack in it. And there were 250 of these in the mess hall also. This is their coffee mug, and they also used it for soup. So Gottfried and Heinrich also probably drank and ate out of this also. But because of the crack, I just assume not pass it down. I don't want anything to happen to it. Also by way of, that one, by the way, was found in a latrine. When they closed up the POW camp, 12 volunteers, POW, German prisoners, volunteered to stay behind and spend the last week, January of 1946, cleaning out the barracks up in the rafters with hidden little bottles. They saved their cologne bottles and stuff to put in homemade hooch and stuff. And all these were hidden up in the rafters of the building. And everything they found they threw into the latrine. With this, Nick dug out of the latrine. And I'll show you more about that in a second. We also have, this is another example of what happened. This ended up in the latrine because the prisoners, and I could see why they would. They all wanted their own private little drinking cup back in the barracks, and so one way or another they came by something to call their very own little drinking thing in the vessel or the barracks. Well, my wife was clearing one of the barracks sites, and she found this. And I got it in a box, so I don't want anything to happen to it. I want the dirt to still be on it, just the way it was when she found it, and so I can pass it around. But it's an aluminum cup, and it's got a little lip made on it, because these hung in the Duffy Mott canning factory over all the vats where they made the jams and the jellies and the this and that. And every so often, the chemist, the control chemist would come through and he would take this cup off a hook, he'd take a scoop of the stuff and put it in a container so it could be taken up to the lab to be tested to see if it was ready for the next ingredient and so on. Well, some German POW, nobody's looking, takes the thing and takes it home. And I happen to know a little bit about the guy that did this. He was left-handed. A right-hander isn't going to take this thing because the spout is right where he would find his chin. And no good for a private drinking cup. This had to have been taken by a left-handed German POW. So I've narrowed it down to 10% of the 400,000 German POWs that came over here. Narrowed it down because when we have come across our very first, Nick found this a few months ago. You would think that a German prisoner of war camp, there would be all kinds of things in the latrine that belonged to a German prisoner that could be identified as having come from Germany. That is not the case. This is the first and only German-made artifact found at the prisoner of war camp. And Nick just found it. People in that area here, they realize if you find something while you're taking a tour that looks interesting, don't throw it away. Carry it over to one of the pallets you see here and there all over the site and put it down there. And somebody, Nick or I, will come by and decide whether it's something that needed to be saved. And this needed to be saved. This is a part of a German mess kit. This is the top part. This is the part that would come unattached from the rest of it. I've researched it on the internet. This was manufactured for the Russian campaign in Germany, this particular one. And so the prisoner, he had this. He either lost it or left in a hurry or something, and it got run over a few times by lawnmowers and what have you, but somebody bothered to save it so that we could show it to you. This is a map of all the prisoner of war camps, or most of them, in the United States. There were 370 some German prisoner of war camps, and the rest of them were Italian, Japanese, and so on and so forth. And these are them. And look at around our area here. Look at the concentration of prisoner of war camps in our area. Lots of them. One of those dots is us. There were 14 German prisoner of war camps in western New York. Ours was the second largest. The largest was Niagara Falls. They had 4,000, and ours was a lot less than that. These are the 14 German prisoner of war camps in western New York. There's us. There's the Niagara Falls. I have them all the way over to Monday and Newark and Marion and so on and so forth. Oakfield is kind of important. We're going to be talking about that in a minute. And look at how close it is to Hamlin. Pretty doggone close. Medina, their prisoner of war camp was in a pickle factory. And I was able to find some rather interesting stuff there. Don't be disturbed by this. There was no prisoner of war camp in Albion. That is on the map here because every time I went to Albion, they said, oh yeah, we have a prisoner of war camp. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. What happened was, when the people got up and started driving to work, they would look and they would see all these German POWs in the parking lot near one of the canning factories. Well, they got there by bus or truck earlier than they did. And when they got home from work, they were already back here in Hamlin, and they figured they were all holed up in some barracks or someplace. So I had to, every time I went to Albion, I had to explain to them that no, you did not have a prisoner of war camp. This is a map of the prisoner of war, our prisoner of war camp population. This is important because every time you pick up a book about German prisoner of war camps, they try to tell you how many people were housed there. I mean, this book, every book you pick up, it's got like Dunkirk, tell you how many, Hamlin, how many, Oakfield, how many. Wrong. The populations of these POW camps fluctuated according to the growing season, the need for labor. In the fall, the population went way up. See, our camp was built to hold 400. They took the 200 beds out of the barracks of the CCC, replaced them with double bunks. That means there was room for 400. But every once in a while, the orders would come in from canning factories and farmers to exceed the usual number, and so they'd bring in some more prisoners from Niagara Falls, and our population would go up. Now, these are not even the exact populations for those particular months. There's a lot of POWs that didn't go to work on that particular day. This is only the population that was paid 80 cents a day during that 2-week period to work. Those who didn't feel like going to work, but we didn't force them to work, or those who were unable because of a knee injury or something like that, they are not on here. Non-commissioned officers, they weren't even allowed for a while to go to work for 80 cents a day. But in spite of all of that limitation, this is our population. You see, we reached 400 a couple of times. Now, the war was over when this camp was going. Here, Hitler died right in here. But look, the camp is still going, flourishing like crazy. It took a long time to do the paperwork to send all of the prisoners back. Heinrich came here. Heinrich was in the very first batch of prisoners that came our way. He christened the camp. He did a lot. He had a lot to do with what happened, and we're going to get to that very, very soon. Now, I know some of you got some questions already. We'll have time for questions and answers, even if we're eating pizza during it. But save your questions. We will answer them. This is, what did I tell myself here? Yeah, this picture was taken in Antwerp, and it was called the City of Sudden Death. We had just taken over Antwerp. This is where we took our prisoners, German prisoners, and put them aboard a ship and sent them our way. Antwerp is called the City of Sudden Death because the German V-2 rockets would fly over or near this site here, and they weren't controlled very well, and you never knew where they were going to come down. They would get hospitals and schools, and as well as military institutions, and so the prisoners were just more than glad to get aboard this ship and get out of there, except occasionally one of these guys. That's not your usual drafted recruits sent into the army. This is the SS or the hardcore Nazi. But all of them were sent our way, and when they got here, pretty much all of them were sent to the center of the country, around Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, that area, where they filtered out these guys, and what was left, they eventually sent them back to the East Coast and put them at 14 in Western New York. This gentleman right here supplied me with a picture. That's Chuck Partridge's father. Those of you who know the Hilton area know him. He gave me the picture. I asked him if he's responsible for the Band-Aid on the chin, and he says, no comment. And that's all I got out of him on that. But this is our camp before it became a prisoner of war camp, just before. This is after it was a CCC camp and before it was a prisoner of war camp. We were very fortunate that when the CCC camp ceased to exist, that ceased to exist the summer of 1941. We weren't in the war yet, but we didn't have anybody on welfare. We couldn't fill the beds. There were too many jobs in Rochester, and so they closed the CCC camp. But somebody had a little bug in their brain here that says, I don't think we ought to tear this down yet. I think maybe we ought to keep it around a while, and rightfully so. Most of your CCC camps only were up for about a year, and most of them were mostly tents. And they would take them down and move them down the road. But this thing here, because they're building Hamlin Beach State Park out of stone that was mined 30 miles from here, taken out of the ground, they had to have a substantial, it was like a little village, this place here. So anyway, they kept it up, and eventually became used as a prisoner of war camp. At first, it was Italian prisoners of war for about a month and a half, and for the Italians, they didn't need any barbed wire. You didn't even need bullets in your guards' guns either, for that particular matter. But when they had to be sent back, and it became a German prisoner of war camp, this is the camp that was put up. This picture is important. You're only the second group that has seen this picture. Everybody else, the picture they saw was the previous picture. There's buildings here. It's before I found somebody that could Photoshop the picture. Mark, right over there, has a brother who was good at Photoshopping, and he had his brother take out these buildings here. On your page 1, you can see the buildings that they're supposed to be here. And I had to draw in the main gate and so on and so forth. But this is pretty doggone close to what the camp actually looked like. Now, I'm a crappy artist, but you know, I tried. But it gives you a pretty good picture, because I have tried everything to get a photograph of it. You can't tell me the U.S. Army doesn't have somewhere a photograph of this camp. The Army is just so detailed about everything. They know where every fork and coffee cup went. You can't tell me they didn't know, they didn't take a picture of this, but I can't get one. I've written to several people in Washington. I even contacted a guy in Texas, a professor who's done several documentaries on television for the Texas POW camps, and he asked, how do I get a picture? He says, you got to go to Washington, and you got to know somebody, and they'll let you in the back room, and they got these cardboard boxes, and you go through these and I haven't, I'm not going to, and I haven't found anybody to go do that for me. And Matthias is shaking his head. He knows that this is to be a trick. It hasn't all been digitized yet. It's all been declassified. But if you want them, you go find them. We haven't got any, we can't afford to pay for it. So we treasure this picture, Mark. It's pretty doggone good. Very, very handy to have. Is this one of the same?
That's the
Oh,
one
it's
without the
another one of the
borders.
same one, okay. All right. This is what the fence really would look like. Now, I don't know how Oakfield got a picture of the camp. We couldn't get one, but Oakfield ended up with this one here. This is their canning factory. Nothing, their prisoner camp is right on the grounds of the canning factory. They didn't have a CCC camp. Very, very few CCC camps became prisoner of war camps. That's another thing that makes ours very, very unique. One of the few CCC camps that also became a prisoner of war camp. But this is their fence. Their prisoners were on the third floor of the canning factory, and all of the business of the canning went down here. And his grandfather, Heinrich, was also here for 6 months. So I know quite a bit about that. I know so much about it that when Oakfield recently published this little book about their prisoner of war camps and their World War II Oakfield community, they conspired with me here, and I supplied a lot of information that they have included in this book. And this is the only copy I got. You think if I contributed to it, they'd give me a couple. No, they made me pay for this. Yeah, and I want Matthias.
I'm sorry.
To see it. Well, she wants to see it too. Yeah, and but that comes back to me. Matthias has not seen that, but you would be interested. Your grandfather had been mentioned several times in there. We do know what our guard towers look like, though. This guard tower was offered to us, but the state park people in Albany said, nah, it would take too much it's too rickety, too hard to get here. This was just down the road, Dewey Avenue. This is what's that boat place, Odenbach's. Odenbach's made boats during World War II. They had a chain link fence around it, and in each corner they had one of these. And this one was still standing about 10 years ago, and they said, come get it, it's all yours. And we sent a team there. I got a gazillion pictures of the thing, but no, Albany says, nah, we ain't gonna monkey around with that. This just happens to be one of the Italian prisoners of war who were here for a month and a half. They had a real good time here. They're blurry not because they've been drinking It's the only picture I got. But here's some German prisoners of war. Now, we weren't supposed to take any pictures. They told us if you take pictures, you get caught taking pictures of the POW camp or any of the prisoners, we're going to jump up and down on your camera so it don't work no more. And if you're a chronic abuser of this law, we're going to throw you in jail. But here's Icus. Icus up on Peck Road. You all know the Icus family. They're still there up on Peck Road. Here's 8 prisoners from the Hamlin camp. I've shown this picture to Heinrich, and I've shown this picture to Godfrey. They didn't recognize anybody in there. But here they are. Last night, Robert asked me, he said, did they let them out of the... How do they get out of the prison? Well, once you got on the truck and you arrived at the job, that's it. I mean, if you wanted to take off for Rochester, go ahead. Just turn your coat inside out so that the PW was on the inside and not the outside. We did have one guy did do that here. Only one escape. It was only one escape from the Hamlin camp. And if I get a minute, I'll tell you about that. But anyway, there's the 8 guys. And everybody says, well, gee, how does everybody feel about having Germans, I mean, our enemy, working in your field? I mean, I'm telling you, that was not an issue. I mean, they were just more people who come to visit Hamlin. That's all there was to it. The healing process for World War II took place in Hamlin, in the POW camp, and in the tomato fields. I mean, the Germans went back and they said, hey, these ain't bad people. And the farmers around here says, wait a minute, these aren't Nazis. These are just like our boys that were sent over there. Anyway, here they are. The farmer said the rule was do not take them anything to drink or eat in the fields. And they did one better here, up on Peck Road. They took them home on Sunday, and they had lemonade and strawberry shortcake, and here's how afraid they are. There's their darling little baby on the lap of one of the German POW. They're real afraid of the Germans. Oh yeah. Here's the same group, and somebody else is throwing a baby up in the air there. But like I said, I don't know the names of these guys, and neither do the people that like us. The Hamlin historian Mary Smith, you saw her picture earlier. This is in her files. There's another bunch of German POWs. I don't know any of them. There's no caption. There's something on the back. One of the guys autographed the back of it and says, here boss, this is for you, and gave it to him. That's all we got. I don't even know. I think it happened down there where the railroad station restaurant is, down that little road there, Railroad Ave, but I'm not exactly sure. But then we get to this guy here. This is Matthias's grandfather. This is Heinrich. This is when he was, the last picture taken to just a few days from this picture here, he was standing by that sign at the Niagara Falls prison camp. He was invited to the historian of Youngstown. He gave her a big long interview. I have the transcript of it. And here he is talking with his hands, describing something in his stay here. In one of the prison camps. He could have been talking about Hamlin, he could have been talking about Oakfield, he could have been talking about Niagara Falls. I don't know. Matthias was there, he probably remembers what he was talking about. But anyway, the lady whose house he was at, she heard what was going on here in Hamlin. She got a word to me through the park. She said, what you need to do is to get a hold of Heinrich Viller. And I said, well, how do I do that? And she says, well, he's agreed to write to you, but he won't write to you directly. He went back to East Germany. They teach you, or taught you in East Germany back then, you don't trust anybody. And so he said he would write to her, she would give the letter to me, and I would write to her, and she would pass it back to him. Well, that worked for one letter. After he got one letter, he decided, well, Evan's not such a bad guy, and so he ended up writing me lots and lots and lots of letters.
He's international.
I have 19 of his letters right here. I bothered to have them laminated so that I could, on occasion, and this is the only occasion, it's the first occasion this has ever happened. I can't even get into my own Velcro, that great stuff. There it is. These are the letters that Heinrich wrote to me. The first couple, he had Matthias, yeah, I said that again, Matthias, proofread to make sure he didn't have any real blaring guffaws in the English language there. And, but you just can't, I wish everybody could have a chance to read them. There's one letter, and I think it's letter number 5. We were having trouble here in the United States politically and what have you. And he writes in there, he says, my heart goes out to you. He says, everybody over here is rooting for you because everybody knows the whole world needs the United States. He says, I mean, the guy, we made a real effective ambassador out of him and all the other POWs that was here. When he finally, after one letter, decided he could trust me, he sent me that. That's his picture just before he went off to northern Africa. He was captured, and he wants everybody to know he did not surrender in North Africa. He was ordered to surrender. He wanted that to be known. He was doing it in his job, and he trusted me so much that he even sent me that picture. There he is at 11 years old. He and I got along really, really good. And then he also sent me this picture. This is him at the Oakfield camp. Now remember the rule is don't take any pictures of the POWs or the camp, but here he is again. There's a picture taken. Somehow everybody broke the rules except the people in Hamlin. Doggone Hamlin. Dear hearts. But anyway, yeah. This is where Heinrich and Gottfried worked. This is the downtown, well, right here, this is where Crosby's is right now. Crosby's, yeah, we drove Matthias by there last night. This is where the little convenience store is. A lot of these buildings are still here. The big ones here are gone. But this is where Heinrich ran into a couple of times a young lady named Nellie. He and Nellie became such good friends that they transferred him from the canning factory to the tomato fields out in Parma. But he kept in touch with Nellie. He stole a stamp. See, the printers were not allowed to use the postal system here. That would be espionage. So he stole himself a stamp, and he bribed a a guard to mail the letter to him, but it didn't get to Nellie. It got back to the commandant, and he got called into the commandant's office, and the commandant said, naughty, you weren't supposed to do that. He says, you go back and finish today in the tomato patch. He says, you come in here tonight, he says, and I'll do the paperwork, and we'll send you off to Niagara Falls. I mean, they got a little jail kind of a thing there, and so he went back that night, and one of those letters says, I remember exactly what he said. He said, I walked into the commandant's office, and I'm going to show Matthias exactly where that all happened very shortly. He walked into the commandant's office, and the commandant says, well, Heinrich, he says, I've been doing some thinking. He says, I was young once too. He says, I think we'll just assign you to the kitchen. And he said, we can take better care of you here than they can in Niagara Falls. And so he went, but he snuck back in here. He borrowed his buddy's name, and he showed up here one night doing his buddy's tour of work, pretending to be his buddy. And he met Nellie, and near as I can figure from his letter, from right about this area in here, and he and Nellie were talking, and all of a sudden he looks up and he sees a guard on the catwalk up there, and he just, shh, he told her, just be quiet, don't say anything. And they just stood there, and the guard walked on by. But a little later in the evening, he looks down the hall, and he's carrying these boxes like he's supposed to for his buddy's job, and he sees the guard coming at him. And the guard stops in front of him. The letter describes it beautifully. The guard comes up front and just takes one look at him, looks him up and down like this, and goes, and walks away. that Heinrich, he was a character. I'll tell you. And this is a close-up view of Duffy Mountain. I showed this to the Hamlin brother, and he recognized it better. This is the area back in here where the guard was on the catwalk and so on. This is where the labs were right here, where the samples were taken of the things that were cooking in the vats and what have you, and taken here and analyzed and what have you. The railroad track went by the other side here. Godfrey, well, I forgot to ever got, Godfrey worked in a building back here, and that building is still there. When Godfrey's grandson came here, like Matthias is here today, I was able to take him, I had got the keys to one of the buildings, and we went back to the back of the building that he worked in. It was exactly the same color, the same door, the same latch, the same everything in World War II, and his grandson had the opportunity to stand there with his elbow on the door and have his picture taken to take back to show Godfrey that he was where Godfrey was when he was working at the canning factory. Kind of a neat little side story. This, by contrast, just to show you how different Hamlin is, how different our camp. This is Oakfield. They had a camp, and then the population went up and down. But this is the canning factory itself, and this is the building you saw previous with a. I told you the third story is where the prisoners were housed, and the canning factory business was down below it. A real compact, and not very interesting, and not homey, not like a little village like Hamlin was. But then I met this guy. Well, I met the guy by way of emails. This is Godfrey. This is another one of our. We only were able to talk to 4 German people out of the 400 and some odd thousand. We were only able to talk firsthand to 4 of them. I talked to 2 of them. Mary Smith talked to 2 others, so for a grand total of 4. This is my second contact with the German population. This is Godfrey Schulze. He was drafted right out of high school, and he didn't have a choice. Heinrich, he enlisted. He couldn't wait. He wanted to drive airplanes, but they were fresh out of them, and so he was in Rommel's Luftwaffe ground forces. But anyway, here you see the uniform doesn't fit too good. You got what was left over, and that was it. But Gottfried ended up being very, very friendly and very, very knowledgeable. And this is the only second time that I've taken this out to give to pass around here. He wrote this 8-page booklet to send to me to tell about his experience as a prisoner of war. And what the heck, this is my real last pony show here. So everybody can take a look at it. I made copies, but there's the original that he sent me. And it tells how he got here. Right after he was drafted, right after this picture here, he was sent to Italy, and that's where he experienced his first war. He was sent to Enzio. You ever hear of that one? Boy, that battle just went back and forth, back and back for a couple of months. Well, he wasn't there very long, and before a shell landed in the middle of his company, everybody was wiped out but him. And he's laid dying in a crater left by the shell. His leg was barely still hooked to the rest of his body. The American medics pulled him out of the barracks, or out of the gully, the shell hole, put him on a hospital ship, and on the way over here on the hospital ship, a Jew doctor saved his leg and saved his life, and he ended up at Niagara Falls. The disappointing part about the whole thing was he could hear the falls for 3 days, but he never got a chance to see it. They put him on a truck and sent him to Hamlin. Now, Heinrich had already been here about 5 weeks when Godfrey got here, and Godfrey got assigned to the same barracks that Heinrich did. So the 2 of them were in the same barracks, 50 feet apart. Now, Heinrich had the ideal barracks spot. He had the barracks way at the end by the back door, 60 feet from the latrine. And he said that was a prime seat. Everybody wanted that bunk, he says. In the middle of the night, you got to go tinkle. He said, you only got 60 feet. Everybody else got to walk. Who knows how far? But 50 feet, this side of the latrine was Godfrey's bed. And the 2 of them never got to know each other there. They lived in the same barracks, but they never remember each other there or nothing. More about that story in a second. Anyway, Gottfried sent his grandson here to visit me. He had me take him off a bus that was doing a tour in the Niagara Falls area, and Nick and I drove to Niagara Falls and snagged him and brought him back to Hamlin. And when his grandson left, he left me with this. Now, Gottfried, I got to keep these straight. Gottfried, he gave me that 8-page booklet. He sent me Christmas cards that were made in our camp. He sent me coupons that they got for their 80 cents a day that he could cash in at the store and what have you. But he says, I'm not going to give you my prized possession. He says, I always wanted a calfskin wallet. He says, and I bought one there with my leftover money. He says, I didn't drink beer and smoke cigarettes, and so I had all this extra money from my 80 cents a day, and he bought himself this wallet. But I'm going to keep that, he says. But when his grandson was here, just before we dropped him off, he went to the trunk of my car, took out his backpack, and says, here, he says, Grandpa wants you to have this, he says. And here it is. And I had the opportunity to go to the site and stand there where he bought this thing. It's really, it was a $100 bill stuck in there to pay for all of our trouble. But anyway, before I put it in this box, see, I got a big magnet here, and I put a piece of metal in the wallet to hold it in there. And I'm putting a piece of metal in there, and out comes this stack of pictures, about the size of a matchbook, about 12 pictures, and here they are. They're the pictures of him later in life. And these are pictures of the guys that died when he ended up in the hole with his leg about gone off, and they were stuck inside of this wallet. So I got on the computer and I says, Gottfried, I said, I found some pictures of you. You didn't mean to have me to have. No, he says, I wondered where the heck those things went. And I scanned them a couple and to show him what I had. He said, oh yeah, I would appreciate you sending them back. So I sent them back after I copied them. But he said that after the fact, I could copy them, and so I did. So here's the wallet, and it came from our prisoner of war camp, and went back to Germany, and came back to our prisoner of war camp. This is his commander. This is him. I think this is him again. He didn't label this picture for me, but I think that's him again. That's shortly before the big disaster. And here he is, a PhD professor at Rostock University, one of Germany's oldest universities. And he had the distinction of, in 1945, yeah, the winter of 1944, 1945 was the worst winter Rochester ever had. They were completely closed in. There were no buses, trains, nothing going in or out of Rochester. And what to do. So what they did was they asked for volunteers at the prisoner of war camp. And of course, Gottfried, he raised his hand, he volunteered. And so for his 80 cents a day, he went downtown Rochester, and this is a picture of the POWs shoveling out the city of Rochester. Gottfried's job was to stand in the railroad yard, shoveling coal in the burlap bags to be delivered to the families who were freezing to death and so on and so forth. Rochester had a prisoner of war camp, but they lobbied the government to get rid of it. What are you doing treating our enemies? You know, the last straw was the people at Cobb's Hill, Rochester, New York, saw the German prisoners one day eating ice cream cones. That was the last straw. And they said, we can't afford the ice cream, and here you got the... But the Geneva Convention said, whatever you're feeding your guards, you've got to feed the prisoners. And that's why. So anyway, they got rid of the German prisoner of war camp just before the blizzard happened. And after the blizzard, and Heinrich and the boys shoveled them out, Cobb's Hill wanted their prisoner of war camp back again, and the government just says, we're not going to go through that baloney again. And there's the grandson, there's Gottfried's grandson. There's the back door. There his grandfather went in and out of loading the boxes onto the train. Depot. And then I get an email from Matthias, about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. He says, I'm on a business trip in Niagara Falls. He says, is it possible for me to meet you? So Nick and I, we drove to Niagara Falls, and there's Nick and I and Matthias sitting on a park bench at Niagara Falls, and I took the opportunity to give him a crash course in the Hamlin CCC POW camp, and one of the park rangers, she says, can I watch? Can I listen? Well, certainly. I mean, so she stood right there, and she asked a couple questions even, and then Matthias and I had a chance to go do what Godfrey couldn't do. We stood there by the falls. We could actually see the falls. And during that conversation, I just happened to drop a real bombshell in Matthias' lap. I told him, you know, there was a guy named Godfrey did the same barracks as your father. And I was plotting their addresses a little while ago on a map of Germany, and I found out they're living 11 miles from each other. And Matthias said, what? Unbelievable. So he went back to Germany, and he arranged a reunion between Godfrey and Matthias, Godfrey and Heinrich. There they are, meeting. Matthias took these pictures. This is probably shortly after they met for the first time, but it appears to be. And then they sat down, and they're poring over your page 2. You got page 2 in front of you, and they got page 2 in front of them also. And they ended up labeling that picture and sending it to me so that I could learn some things about our camp that I did not know about. And here's the 3 of them together. And right over here is a German newspaper page with a story of that reunion that Matthias organized. There's a picture there. Take a look at it on your way out. Heinrich is holding out a pin that I bought in the Hamlin Town Hall. It says, welcome to the town of Hamlin. And I told him, you are now an official member of the Hamlin, populated the Hamlin town of Hamlin. And he was real proud of that pin. He's showing this German photographer that pin. And I also sent him, don't tell anybody at the park though, because I don't want to get in trouble. But I sent each of them a 1-foot piece of the barbed wire. That the real stuff, not the stuff we dug up. When they tore the camp down, they bundled up 10 miles of barbed wire and coils and told the farmers to come in and help themselves. Well, the farmers left, as far as I can see, 3 piles that are still there. And I just snipped off 2 12-inch pieces, and I mailed it to the guys. And all the other things I sent to them, both of them told me the thing they cherished the most was that piece of barbed wire. I mean, for all the time, looking through that wire all the time at the cars going by and stuff, it would really meant something to have a piece of that in their hands. Well, don't hurt, well, wait a minute. What the heck, you won't hurt yourself, but here's a piece of it I've got in a tube so that you can't get hurt. But there's the actual wire, for those of you who are curious. There's the article. And
did you translate what it says on the headline?
I took 2 years of German in college, but I don't remember much of it. But what does the headline say?
Jointly imprisoned without knowing it.
I have the English translation on the back. I found a lady in Rockport who translated it for me, and I've read it a few times, but I couldn't remember what the title said. Very, very, very good. Yeah.
It describes exactly what you just said.
Well, let's pass it right down there. Yeah. It's quite a story, and that pretty much ends my canned talk here. I want to take the opportunity to add just I'll better leave this on. A couple of little things here. I told you this is my last talk, and it is because I don't have, thank you, he's following the cue cards here too, very good. I've got to impart the following message. Even though I'm not going to be, I've already turned down some talks and stuff, people will call me, but But this has not got to stop. You've got to keep this thing going. It doesn't have an end. And here's an example of it doesn't have an end. Now, Mary passed away a year ago. And her sons, right after the funeral, up there in the graveyard, they brought me this crate of her private collection of CCC POW stuff that she'd been collecting for years. And in it was a story about this guy. Now, I knew about that guy. She called him Mr. S. He was a German prisoner of war who went back to Germany but spent 6 years doing the paperwork to come back here. And that option was open to everybody. It was open to Gottfried, it was open to Heinrich. They both decided after being here just a few months, this is where they wanted to live after the war. But unfortunately, Gottfried and Heinrich, they went back to the East German sector of Germany, and nobody got out of there. I mean, but this guy, he did make it back. And Mary somehow, she finagled her way to get to meet this guy, and she promised him if he could tell her anything, and she wouldn't tell anybody what his name was. She'd call him Mr. S. Well, I wormed out of her one day what the S stood for. She says Sheridan. Well, I know how to spell Sheridan. There was a Civil War general named Sheridan, and I get in the phone book and I can't find any Sheridans that had this, in our particular, in the Kendall area, none whatsoever. Well, when I got this stuff after Mary's death and I'm reading through it, I find out it's Sheridan all right, but it's S-H-E-R-D-I-N, German spelling. Aha! Now I check on the phone book, and there are S-H-E-R-D-I-N's in the neighborhood. His sons, what have you. And here he is with Mary. This lady here, her father was in a prisoner of war camp, Hamlin, for a short while. She didn't know exactly how long. All she knew was that one of the farmers that he worked for, he made her godparents. Her godfather and godmother were the farmers that her father worked for, and she was here to meet her godparents for the first time. And she spoke very little English, lots of German. She comes from Greece, over in Europe, Greece, Europe. Her husband didn't speak a word of English or German. But anyway, he was hired or asked by Mary to come there and kind of interpret, and she got to meet her grandparents. But anyway, there he is. Mr. S. Martin Sheridan. Well, I kept reading in this book, and he was in Barracks 3. The same as Gottfried, and the same as Heinrich, in the same damn barracks. And he was in there the same time. Now, Heinrich had moved on to Oakfield. But he got there, and Gottfried was still there, and I said, well, they might have known each other. Gosh, I wish I had known this. I wish I could have asked, he died in 2002. I wish I could have asked Gottfried if he remembered this guy. It would help him reminisce about his World War II days. And I read a little bit further, and he says, to Mary in his interview, he was one of the last 12 to go through the barracks and look for stuff and clean out the barracks. One of the last 12. Well, Gottfried had sent me a letter and said he was one of the last 12. So here, what is the likelihood that he did not know Gottfried? They had to have known each other. So here we are, 3 German POWs, the only 3 we've ever had a chance to talk to firsthand. And how the hell did they end up in the same barracks, I mean, and know each other? What in the heck is going on here? And the 4th guy, he didn't tell us which barracks he was in. I'll just bet you. He was in California. He was taking a trip to California, he and his wife and somebody else. And he took a side trip from California to Hamlin to see if there was anything left in 1976. He was very disappointed. There was nothing left. Just jungle. And they got a picture of him standing in the middle of the jungle, and that was it. But he also worked at Duffy Mott's, and so did Gottfried. And so it's very likelihood that all 4 of them were in the same dog line. And this whole project has just been full of so many coincidences, and you just wouldn't you can't imagine the stuff that's gone on here. Then, finally, just to show you that there's no end to this at all. Heinrich was in, I told you, Oakfield, and in one of the letters, he tells me about one of the only 2 POWs in the 14 Western New York camps that died here. One of them was at Oakfield, and Heinrich knew him because he wrote about him in his letter, and he felt sorry for him. The guy was 40-some years old. The guy, he was 47 years old, everybody else was 20, 21, 22, whatever. And he complained of having to carry around all these crates, these heavy cartons of stuff. His back. Could you give me an easier job, he says. He says, can I have a job in the kitchen? So they gave him a job in the kitchen. No problem. We were very, very friendly to the German POW. Well, the first night on the job, he unlatched the lid on a pressure cooker and scalded himself from the waist up instantly, died instantly. The death certificate says heart attack. And the poor family of this guy, she called me. Her name is Cora. She's researching her family tree. And she runs this uncle of hers, her grand uncle, died in a prison camp. She's curious. Her son's, far as they know, prison camp. That means like Russian prison camp. He probably was beaten to death. He could have been shot. I mean, they were treated pretty badly in the German prison camps. And that's all the memories they had. But she contacted Oakfield, and Oakfield says, you've got to talk to Ed Evans. So she called, she got a hold of me, and I told her what it was like in the German prisoner of war camp. And she immediately she said she couldn't wait to tell her sons that he did not die while suffering miserably, as everybody thought he had. He had an unfortunate accident, but at least the ending was, you know, he wasn't dodging bullets, he was eating real good, had all kinds of friends, and so on and so forth. And she and I have been conversing back and forth. She has since started, she put together a big display in the local museum there. She's got a little organization going in. They're looking all over for more Western New York prisoners over in that area. They found some more prisoners, but none from Western New York yet. And she wrote a letter to the equivalent of their National Archives or whatever you call it. And they promised her a 70-page report. Well, 2 months ago, the report came. All 70 pages of it. And the family got, for the very first time, a photograph of this guy. Nobody in the entire family had a photograph of it. I got a picture of his wife, I got a picture of his daughter, but I had they didn't even have a picture of him, for crying out. But they sent him one, and his fingerprints, and all kinds of information. And the information, she still hasn't read all of the 70 pages yet. Now, there's the guy's wife, and her 11-year-old son has been reading the emails over her shoulder. And he saw Mark's picture down there, this one right here, and an 11-year-old German boy took such an interest in it that the 11-year-old boy took out his little attachment to his computer and he drew in a more realistic fence. And he drew in a realistic set of guard towers and so on and so forth. So this is an 11-year-old German boy. There's his picture. Painting that picture. I'm telling you, this spread. There's people in Europe now because of what Heinrich started with me in our camp here, doing all kinds of research. This has no end, folks. It's still going on, and somebody in this room here and beyond has got to make sure that it continues. And what time is it? Is it pizza time?
No,
Is the pizza here?
no, we ordered for 12:30, it's only 11:30.
I can't hear what you said.
It's only 11:30 right now, the pizza won't be until 12:30.
Oh, good. Oh, good. 'Cause I had cut out a part that I don't want to cut out. And good. Good. And we got time for questions, but you're going to like this now. I can't take you. I can't take you to the site. But what I can do is to do kind of a, you follow along on page 2. Your page 2. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use that 11-year-old's picture. And I'm going to give you a tour of the POW camp. Now I can see my watch. Oh, goody. We got time for this, right? So I had to hurry through it, but I didn't want to conflict with the pizza here. But all right, here we go. This part here on your picture, on your page 2, I don't know exactly when to remove it. I titled this thing Opening Day. This is the day that Heinrich got off of the truck from Niagara Falls, and he was buried. This is his barracks. He was putting that barracks right there. This was his bunk right there, right in the very end. Gottfried's bunk was on the other side, right there. And Matthias asked me last week, how do you know exactly where these things are? Well, once I found the flagpole, I could find the fronts of all these buildings. And the neat part about it is, wherever there was a building, there's now a dent in the ground. Now the local farmers and even the archaeologists from Albany, they don't know exactly what causes the dent under the ground. Now all it was there was a flat floor about this far above the ground when they built the site. I have pictures of the site before the buildings were there. There were no dents in the ground. It was all perfectly flat. And every 6 feet, there was an upright post supporting the floor, and it was a very substantial floor. But where all these buildings were, with the wooden floors, there's now a dent in the ground. So that's your first hint that you're near a building site. And then all these buildings here and here, and just outside the front door on the ground, there's a piece of cement, about like this. And a lot of these buildings still have that cement in place. But the cement is enclosed in a little entryway. All these buildings here had entryways on the front of them. The west winds come from this way, and so the door into the buildings is on this side of the entryway, and accordingly on the other side. And that little cement piece was inside the little entryway. And so once I found that one, and I found this one here busted up. Found this one here. This is where the guards were. The U.S. Army's main barracks was. They had 3 pieces of cement there instead of just one outside their door, and it's all still there. And I have a picture of it, and the same cracks in it in the picture are still there today. This boy right here with his shovel was the guy that cleared it all up. But anyway, when Heinrich gets here, the flagpole has very soon got to come down. The Geneva Convention manual says you are not allowed to cram your ideology into their head with their flags and banners and all the rest of that stuff. So they sawed it off. And they put another flagpole, a new flagpole there, and they put another flagpole here. I have a photograph of this picture, this flagpole here. And this is where the trucks came in here every day, come down here and lined up. And the prisoners would get into one of these trucks that just happened to be where they were coming out. The guard car, Margie, she would drive in here. She says they had a little slogan. Once around the flagpole, she says, and you turn up and you park. And so the guard cars all parked right here. And she could sit in her convertible, and she could see the POWs coming down through here through the gate. They see her sitting in the convertible, and you see the convertible right there, and they see her doing, she thought that was pretty neat, and they get in their truck, and that truck pulls out, and she pulls behind it, and down they go to Albion or wherever they go, and then the next truck comes down, and the next guard car follows it out, and so on. And every single morning, that was her job, to show up there to get part of this particular parade. Now, right after Heinrich got there, this had to be changed. Heinrich and all the other people in his barracks, they decided something's wrong here. There is no place to recreate. There's no place to sit down and read a magazine, or get a magazine, or buy a candy bar, or play chess, or cards, or nothing. And so they had to sit down strike out here. And one of the letters just describes it. The letter is that's out there. And he's very, very meticulous in the description. He was able to describe to me where in this fence there was a gate. He called it a people gate. That's Heinrich's term, people gate. And not big enough for a car, it's for people to come through. And that was right in here. And I had no idea it was there until Heinrich told me it was there. When Heinrich told me it was there, I go there and I find there's all kinds of pieces of cement flat on top. They've been broken up cement, all put down, kind of like in a mosaic thing for like an entryway. And that was so that there's a gate there, and if your people walking through the gate, pretty soon you got one of these, and you just crawl under the fence. And so wherever there was a people gate, there had to be some kind of rugged, durable surface, and there was one here, and we found another one back here later. Once we found it, we knew what, no guessing. Because of this, we knew what that was when we ran across it. So it worked. The guards, they came with their guns, their rifles, and everything, and they left. And the letter says, a short time thereafter, this became their recreation building. That was the recreation building for the CCC camp. But when they put the prison camp up, they don't need that. But Heinrich told them, we need it. And so they cut the fence, and the fence hooked on the back corner here, and hooked onto here, and continued on. And now, from that point on, the recreation building for the CCC became the rec building for the POW camp. And Mr. S. did a very good description of what it was on the inside. Heinrich didn't write a whole lot about the inside of it. Godfrey, he used, this is where he bought the back side of it here, and that's where he bought his wallet. Just the back little add-on thing here was the store. That's where he bought the wallet. This little front end up here was a stage for the CCC. They were required, the CCC, each barracks, to put on a program once a week for the rest of the camp. And that stage was still there when the POWs were here. This is the commandant's office. This is where Heinrich was called to task when he wrote the letter to Nellie, and it ended up on the commandant's desk. And Heinrich probably was ushered in through this people gate here to confront the commandant, who by the evening when he showed up again for the tomato fields, had decided that they could take better care of him in Hamlin than they could in Niagara Falls. They don't mention this building much. This was just guards barracks, but this was for the VIPs during the CCC era. The diplomats from Washington, the people that were the dollar bill counters to make sure that none of it got spent in the wrong places. That's where they were. And so this building here actually had running water in. This was the infirmary. And neither Heinrich nor Godfrey mentioned ever having to go to the infirmary. They mentioned it was there, and they mentioned that there was one accident that somebody had to go there, but they didn't have much call for it. But Heinrich, he did have some experience with the medical end of things when he got to Oakfield. At Oakfield, he got a rather humorous story there, helping set up the dentist's office, and the dentist in his case of instruments, what have you, the whole bottom was full of booze bottles, and they had themselves a nice little booze party. And that story was also picked up. I got a hold of a magazine. I forget the name of it. It's a Western New York history magazine, but anyway, a big long article. A guy by the name of Erhard Gallman wrote the article. And I paid the Liftbridge Bookshop for $37 to get a CD of the thing. The CD says you can only make 2 copies of it, but they're all over the place. I didn't seem to get any letters in the mail or nothing, so it must have been. But anyway, that article, it just kept mentioning my buddy Willert here, my buddy, and all the stuff that's in Heinrich's letters is in this guy's article, plus some more stuff. And I learned some stuff from Matthias last night that I'm going to add to this collection. I didn't know that he met Nellie at the fence, and they talked through the barbed wire to each other. I'm going to find out some more about that. My wife and I are taking them to the Tavern 19 for supper, and we'll finish the debriefing here. This is the main gate is here. There was another people's gate here. Let's see, what else can I tell you? This is the latrine. A lot of that is still there. See, there's no cement anywhere in here except to hold up the main gate post and what have you. Everything else was done on flat floors. But there's a cement floor here, there's a cement floor here, there's a cement floor here. But this cement floor here, Nick helped us with that. It's pretty clever, huh? Uh-oh. Where's the other part? Oh, I am missing a part. Doggone it all. Maybe it'll show up. But anyway, here's a piece. This is the toilet pit of the latrine.